Hello. Welcome to my secret spot. My special place. My little Herald Zone. This is the place I go to play DS while mom and dad think I'm asleep. The place where I can clear my head when I'm sad, or ponder life when I'm restless. The place where I go to be alone. The place where I piss, shit, and fuck. We all have places like this. I've just shown you my spot, but I get if you don't want to show me yours. It is supposed to be secret after all. So, in the spirit of discussion, I figured I'd take things to more neutral ground, and that's the realm of video games. These shits always have secret areas hidden within them, environments that are obscured from the player in some cryptic manner. I love this sort of shit. Games are kind of the only art form where you can get secrets like this. The interactivity of games opens the door for vastly different experiences for each audience member, which, among other things, means some players will naturally experience more of the game's content than others. In movies, by comparison, all the content is laid out and played linearly. The biggest secrets you ever get are Easter eggs or whatever, stuff that's hidden in plain sight, which requires the viewer to have a sharp eye and to be in the know to find. But it doesn't really go deeper than that. I guess it's kind of cool if you like that sort of thing, but in games you can get full-on hidden content, secrets, secret areas, shit that a majority of players will never see. As an artist, I really respect the idea of concealing parts of your hard work like this, and I feel like there's a lot of meaning hidden within these places that's just begging to be put into words. So you know what? I'm just going to sit here and talk about some of my favorite secret areas in video games. This video doesn't really have any particular structure to it. I've just picked a small handful of my favorite areas, and I'm going to talk a bit about what each one means to me. I'm definitely going to get all artsy about my descriptions, so if you think I'm being pretentious, you can just leave a dislike and a mean comment calling me a fucking 50-watt incandescent light bulb headed motherfucker, and I'll just read it later while I shovel ice cream into my mouth and cry like a little pissy baby and edge for 3 hours as punishment. Last thing, I'm going to spoil some really cool games, so if you haven't played these, and you want to try them out blind, go do that before you watch, because I will be going in depth for most of these. And I would never fucking forgive myself if I ruined someone's first run of Super Mario Bros. My first favorite secret area is Ash Lake from Dark Souls. You access this place by entering the mouth of the Great Hollow in Blight Town and breaking not one, but 2 illusory walls in a row. It's actually kind of fucked up because you break the first one and are presented with a chest with a sort of mundane item in it, so you kind of assume that that's the secret, but no, there's another fucking illusory wall right behind it that essentially hides away the secrets of the goddamn universe and also has these shitty basilisk enemies that curse you. After descending down the Great Hollow, which is a huge, presumably dead tree that takes root all the way down in the underworld, you're met with this sight. This area stands out to me because it's not just a secret room or something, it's a full-on level that the game's developers probably spent weeks or even months of collective time on, and it's completely hidden, behind 2 fucking illusory walls. What gets me too is how unique, as well as significant, Ash Lake is to Dark Souls, despite being hidden. There's nowhere else in the game that looks anything like this. That floor made of ash with an endless expanse of trees into a misty blue distance is a look that is exclusive to this place. And I think that's worth noting because it takes a lot of manpower to make shit when you're making games. They had to get artists and level designers and programmers and modelers and sound designers and probably a bunch of other creatives to work their asses off to make this place that most players would never enter. Other developers make secret levels like this, but they'll usually reuse assets and keep things light. They're not going to go crazy and draft up a bunch of concept art and make a bunch of unique assets for something only a fraction of people are going to see. They're going to be economical and put something together with what they have on hand, and maybe make a new evil cow enemy to swarm you as punishment for your sins. The only other game I can think of that's even had a large-scale secret level like this is Symphony of the Night, which has a secret inverted castle, which is the entire world of the game but flipped upside down with new enemies. And that shit's fucking nuts, totally worth mentioning. Same with the painted world of Ariamis, another full-on secret area in Dark Souls, which is actually even more convoluted to get to, and is admittedly a much more polished and content-rich level than Ash Lake, with a unique and cool boss fight at the end. That shit's fucking interesting, and there's definitely an amazing story being told there, but I think I like Ash Lake a little bit more than the painted world, just because I find it so much more enigmatic and meditative by comparison. Unlike the painted world, which is an interesting side story in the world of the game, Ash Lake has really rich ties to the overarching lore and themes of Dark Souls, all the while being pretty much completely hidden. To summarize my own understanding of things, Ash Lake is where the gods and primordial ancestors of humanity existed as one humanoid race of what the game calls pygmies, before being inexplicably ensouled by fire and granted varying levels of power, which gave them the gall to declare war on the immortal race of dragons which dominated the world at the time. And now, after having exterminated pretty much all of them, the ensouled are doomed to vie for power and scratch and tear at each other, and probably elect Margaret Thatcher along the way, until the end of the world. Ash Lake, this place, is essentially the cradle of human nature, now devoid of humanoid life and fittingly filled with ash, no doubt a byproduct of godly and human endeavors, going along with the motif of ashes in this game, and the idea that the whole world is slowly decaying as the living burn it away. This place also has one of the only pieces of non-diegetic music that plays in the game outside of a boss fight to accompany this NPC, the Everlasting Dragon. It's not a super fleshed out character or anything like that. Dragons in Dark Souls never even speak, but you can still commune with this one and even go into covenant with it. And with that music, it commands such a unique presence that no other docile NPC in this game has. This might be an overly optimistic interpretation, and I'm sure there are dozens of theories that disagree with it, but I think it's kind of beautiful to think that your guy, who's a human, is reconciling with the last remaining dragon, probably thousands of years after both your ancestors battled. It feels like your guy is given the chance to reflect on their humanity here and sort of come to terms with the history of their world and its inevitable end, which is very relevant since your character is eventually given the responsibility of deciding the world's fate, assuming they make it to the end of the game. If you're familiar with the hero's journey monomyth theory and stories, this place kind of feels like the part where the hero descends into the underworld and experiences some kind of revelation about the world or their identity or whatever. You know, it's like in Star Wars when Luke Skywalker sees a premonition of the future, where he kills Darth Vader and sees his own face behind Vader's mask. There is actually a similar scene in Dark Souls where you go to the Abyss and meet Koth, the primordial serpent who reveals to you an alternative option to that of Frampt, the other serpent, on what to do with the world should you fulfill the prophecy. The latter wants you to sacrifice yourself to link the flame and prolong the dwindling age of fire, while the former says you can actually just let the flame die out and become ruler of the world as it enters an age of darkness. What Ash Lake reveals is a third, not option, but perspective, that your choice doesn't really matter either way. No matter how you change the world, it'll all eventually burn away into a pile of ash. The fact that this place is secret makes all of this feel even more meaningful to me, because it makes this revelation I've just described all the more obscure. Only an extraordinarily avid and curious player will uncover this place, so the area's secrecy acts as a sort of litmus test to see if the player is worthy of stepping into this bizarre sacred place. And if you are, if you're willing to break down those 2 illusory walls in a row and fight those fucking basilisks, then you're worthy of witnessing one of this world's deepest secrets. Does this make sense? Do you know what I'm getting at? You probably don't. You probably looked this shit up on Google so you can figure out how to become a dragon. I did too. I know I'm getting pretty far up my own ass here, so I'm gonna wrap this bit up. I love Ash Lake, it makes me think lots of interesting thoughts, and it's very pretty and blue. Next area. Our next game is Shadow of the Colossus, and if you're familiar with this game, you probably know exactly what I'm going to talk about here, and that's the Secret Garden. Now, whether or not this place is actually secret is debatable, since this is the same place you see in the ending cutscene of the game, but the fact that you can actually go there in-game is absolutely a secret. You do so by climbing up the outer wall of the Shrine of Worship, but the climb is so long that you probably won't be able to make it to the top unless you upgrade your stamina a bunch, which took me a couple full playthroughs with New Game Plus to achieve. Here's a tip if you actually want to access this area yourself. You can hang out on this lip here to regenerate all your stamina halfway through the climb, which makes things way easier. You might piss a couple liters of gamer tears along the way, but with enough persistence, you'll make it up fine. The Secret Garden is similar to Ash Lake in the sense that it's this neat little meditative space that's hidden, but unlike Ash Lake, which was still a full-on level where you fought stuff and talked to NPCs and turned yourself into a dragon, the Secret Garden of the Forbidden Lands doesn't really have any conventional content or extrinsic rewards within it. The only things you can even interact with in this area are these fruits you can shoot down from the trees that, unlike the consumables everywhere else in the game, which can boost your character's stats, these actually decrease your max health and stamina permanently. Some secret this is, right? What a load of fucking crap this video is. Fuck you, Harold. We can go eat turds for thinking that point, Dexter, because these fruits are actually interesting as hell, and they say a lot about this game and the artistic vision of its creators. People in the Shadow of the Colossus community often call the fruits poison fruit because they debuff your character, so obviously they're bad for you, and thus poison, right? Well, there's actually a snippet from an interview with the game's director, Fumito Ueda, where he talks briefly about the stat-draining fruit and his interpretation behind it. I'll mention briefly that I read this article off of fandom.com, where it's been archived after the website it was originally posted on, 1UP, closed down. So there's actually a small chance that the source isn't reputable and that Ueda never actually said this, but even if that's somehow the case, I still find this interpretation interesting and worthy of consideration. He says that the fruits you usually find throughout the game's world, the ones that power you up, bring you closer to a non-human existence, while the Secret Garden's fruits return you to a human one. And he doesn't elaborate, at least not in this interview, but that little tidbit was enough to kickstart the part of my brain with a JPEG of MatPat's face saved to it. I mean, it totally makes sense alongside the narrative of Shadow of the Colossus, which is about your guy going around slaying a bunch of colossi to satisfy a twisted deal with the spirit, losing his humanity in the process until he's eventually consumed by darkness. With every Colossus you kill, you gain a little bit of power, I guess from each reawakened piece of Dorman. And with every piece of food you eat, the same happens, except maybe that newfound power is instead coming from the cursed Forbidden Lands themselves. So it's like you have these cursed lands that have the power to distort people into something inhuman, and then atop the shrine of worship, in the middle of those lands, you have this hidden sanctuary, this bastion of hope, that has the power to restore humanity. And it's no coincidence that this is where the characters all go at the end of the game. After Mono reawakens after death, Augur the horse returns with a limp after a death-defying fall, and the Wanderer has been reborn as a baby with horns. These three characters who, each in their own way, have returned from the dead after the Wanderer essentially violated the laws of nature, are welcomed into this paradise on Earth. And I feel like the implication is there, with all of these innocent animals surrounding them in the end cutscene, that peace is returning to these lands. Maybe the lands themselves have been reborn. Talking a little bit more about this area's context within actual gameplay, remember how I theorized earlier about Ash Lake's secrecy being a sort of litmus test for the player, which, if passed, reveals to the worthy player a secret part of the world and some kind of truth to go with it. I think the same is true for the Secret Garden as well, except kinda in reverse, because the test you overcome doesn't just prove the player's curiosity, but their depravity as well. Let's examine some player motivations to demonstrate what I mean. To enter the Secret Garden during gameplay, one has to be both curious and ambitious. They have to be the sort of person who sees that they can climb the vines on this wall in their first playthrough, tries to get as high as they can, and falls, but knows that it'd be possible to climb higher and potentially find something interesting at the top if only they had enough stamina. As they play the game like normal, they realize that their character is getting stronger, and that if they played long enough, eventually they'd be strong enough to climb all the way up. So this person willfully slaughters Colossus after Colossus and lizard after lizard, fulfilling Dorman's deal several times over, all in pursuit of that power. They have to become the sort of person who's willing to pave their path in blood and blindly abandon their humanity just to see what's at the top of this tower. And the thing they find, the answer to their curiosity, is this place, peaceful, serene, bearing fruits that restore your humanity. For that reason, I think the Secret Garden in Shadow of the Colossus represents forgiveness. The idea that you can find peace with yourself, others, and in this case, nature, even after having stooped morally low. There are a lot of games that have so-called morality systems built into them. These sorts of games give the player multiple choices in how they can interact with or progress through the game, some choices more or less moral than others. Like in this game, you have the option to kill or spare all the enemies you fight, and when you get to the end, the game assesses your choices and gives you a different ending based on your behavior. If you were a little pussy-ass Boy Scout who never killed anybody, you got the good ending, where everything turns out great for your character and everyone does a musical number. But if you actually had fun with the game and slit everyone's necks like any self-respecting person would, you got the bad ending, where everything's fucked up and the rats finally take over New York. Shadow of the Colossus doesn't really have anything like this. You either murder all the Colossi and free an evil spirit, or you murder all the Colossi and free an evil spirit several times over, and there's only one ending, one way the game answers to your crimes: forgiveness. It doesn't judge you. No matter how much evil you commit, balance will always return to the world. All you have to do is let go of your guilt, eat the fruit, and your humanity will be restored. Keep that in mind next time your roommate decides to leave their leftover PF Changs in the fridge for 3 weeks straight. If you lose health after eating it, that means it's working. God, this game fucking tears ass, man. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I just love playing it and being in it and talking about it. Such a beautiful piece of work. Regardless, it's time to move on to our next game. Before I tell you about the best secret area in Super Mario Bros., let me tell you first about the second best secret area in Super Mario Bros. The Warp Zone, specifically the one in World 1-2 that everyone knows about. If you're out of the loop, basically, you can ride up one of these moving platforms and jump on top of the level, and if you go to the end, past the exit pipe, you'll end up at the Warp Zone, which can take you to later parts of the game as far as World 4, which means you can skip almost half the game just by going here. It's so cool that the developers anticipated that some players would think outside the box and try to go off script here, and instead of blocking them off with an invisible wall or something, they just rolled with it and rewarded them with a genuinely super useful game skip. I get why most game developers have never done shit like this, but I respect the hell out of these guys for doing it. Moving on to the best secret area in Super Mario Bros., we don't have to look far for the entrance. In fact, it's very nearby. It just requires a bit more finesse to enter. Yeah. By fucking with this game's collision detection, you can walk right through the wall above the exit pipe and enter the warp zone in a completely unintended way. Doing so messes with the way the game loads the warp points, so when we jump into this first pipe, note that we're not going to World 4 this time. We're going someplace else. Welcome to World -1, a secret underwater level from which there is no escape. It may seem like an ordinary level as you play. Once you get to the exit, passing through will spit you right back out to the beginning of the same level. And no matter how much you try, no matter how many times you go through this level and try to exit, you can never leave, except as a dead man. This is where we start to stretch the definition of what a secret area is, because now we're crossing the line of developer intent. This is a glitched level. Despite being a duplicate of World 7-2 from later in the game, I'd argue that this area has a completely different essence to it in comparison to that level, and is thus a completely different area because of the way you erroneously access it, and because of the way it creepily traps your character. There's something much more eerie and sinister feeling about this place, knowing that we're at the mercy of the game, and that the game is not merciful. You know, one interesting way to describe the job of a game designer, or really any kind of designer/artist, is that they take pieces of matter that make up our world and arrange them ingeniously into shapes that are meant to communicate with or benefit other humans in some way. In the case of computer games, a machine or computer is constructed, which is capable of reading inputs from humans and displaying a response, usually on a screen of some sort. Then, software is written and read by the machine, which interprets user inputs in the context of some kind of user interface. This includes games which interpret those inputs within a fictional scenario. In Mario, the inputs become the real-time actions of an avatar whose objective is running towards screen right, jumping between blocks, avoiding hazards, and saying "Wahoo!" The designers and the people involved in manufacturing whatever hardware this game runs on all worked to take naturally occurring materials such as metal and electricity, pieces of nature, and shape them into the form that is Super Mario Bros. The thing about nature or the universe is that while I believe it has a sort of overarching order to it, it is so vast and complex that it cannot be fully understood by humanity and therefore can produce events that humans find chaotic or unpredictable. I think glitches like the Minus World are evidence of this. This glitch is universal to all copies in all versions of the game. It doesn't happen because I dropped my copy of Mario in the mud and messed up the circuitry or whatever. It happens because the baked-in systems determining how collision detection and loading work simply don't account for the possibility of Mario hitting this wall at this particular angle, clipping through and avoiding a loading trigger. It is an oversight, an unintended consequence to intentional design. That means that even within the constraints of the developer's rules, Super Mario Bros. Has some amount of freedom to act on intentions of its own. There is a ghost in the machine. Entering the Minus World gives you an immediate understanding of this, even if you can't quite put it into words. Usually in Mario, you're given the challenge of jumping or swimming around a carefully constructed obstacle course that's designed to test your motor skills and your ability to think strategically. Sometimes it can get a bit difficult. I myself am horrendous at this game, but it's a challenge that's meant to be overcome. Every piece of this game is placed in a way that pertains to your experience. The world revolves around you, so you're constantly reassured that you are important. When you enter the Minus World, that illusion is broken. The considerate hand of the designer is gone here, and you can tell. The space is not designed for a human being to interact with or prevail over. It is nature itself trespassing on your experience. The Japanese version of this game illustrates these points even more clearly. In that version, you enter the Minus World and are met with this sight. It's another pre-existing level from the game erroneously loaded in, but this time everything is all sorts of fucky. The level's been transformed into a water level when it originally wasn't one. You have character sprites of Princess Peach placed everywhere, and the final boss, Bowser, even spawns here when he's not supposed to. Get to the end of the level and you'll actually progress to subsequent Minus Worlds that are equally as fucked up as this one. So not only is Super Mario Bros. Able to act outside of its designer's intentions, but in this version it goes so far as to swap out assets in the control scheme, meaning that it's essentially created entirely new levels from pre-existing assets. And it's not like a roguelike sort of situation where the level is intentionally generated quote-unquote randomly with an algorithm. Mario Bros. Created these levels by itself, and nobody told it to. In fact, it seems unlikely that any human even knew the levels existed until they were accidentally discovered by a player sometime after the game released to market. It makes me wonder what else could be hidden in the games we play that no human has ever witnessed. All this stuff I've been saying about a computer that can act of its own accord or a ghost in the machine might seem validating towards sci-fi horror stuff you've seen, like movies about AIs gaining sentience, or even video game creepypastas, which do in fact often involve game cartridges or systems that are secretly haunted. And I can see why you draw those comparisons, but I'll reiterate one last time that the Minus World is simply a case of nature intruding on a man-made creation, one which happens to be capable of generating imagery. I struggled to justify the idea of Super Mario Bros. Being analogous to a conscious thing, because while it does act on its own terms, I don't think it has anything resembling feelings, whether that word means emotions or senses, which are important criteria when determining consciousness. I will try and justify that maybe the inner workings of Super Mario Bros. Resemble a subconscious, since, much like the human subconscious, it is capable of generating ideas in imagery without use of higher thinking, which is exactly what happens when we fall asleep. If we take that perspective, then maybe the Minus World from Super Mario Bros. Is an example of a playable dream. A dream from which the machine shall never awake, but one which we have the privilege of peering into. And if that ain't some shit, then I don't know what is. There's one more area I'd like to talk about, and it can be found in the Forest Temple from Ocarina of Time. And it's not a glitch or anything like the last area, but I find it interesting for similar reasons. How do you access this place? It's very simple. You go through the Lost Woods, enter the temple, go to this room, stand about here, go into first person mode, and just look up at these battlements at the top of this wall. Just stare for a while. You might be scratching your head right now. Is something gonna happen? Are we gonna get teleported to the secret area if we stare at the sky long enough? No. What you're looking at is the secret area. This site. If you've played this game before, you might already see what I'm getting at, but if you haven't or don't, let me give some more context. The Forest Temple, the place we're at, is this dark, decrepit castle that's hidden deep within a magical forest, cloaked within a thick canopy of trees. It's this misty, disorienting place where wayward spirits reside. It's the first dungeon you arrive at after your character first transforms into an adult, a major turning point in the game's story, and the part where its tone takes something of a turn towards darker subject matter. I'm sure many who've played this game would agree that this place kinda represents your character's loss of childlike innocence. The Shadow Temple is revered as one of the most compelling and atmospheric areas in Ocarina of Time, and in early 3D games in general. And yet, in this area within the temple, you look up, and there's this blue sky with these kind of puffy looking clouds. It actually looks like it's a really nice day out too, like maybe it's 65 and there's a gentle breeze blowing through the castle, which totally goes against the tone and the atmosphere one would assume this place has. But beyond just breaking up the mood in an interesting way, this whole view is drenched in unreality. Like the way the clouds are just completely static. They don't move at all and it looks really fake. There's also the mossy wall and the battlements on top, which absolutely fascinate me. The wall, for starters, is completely blank. Zero decoration or depth implied aside from the recursive stone brick texture applied to it. It looks exactly like something you'd build in Minecraft in like 2011. The battlements are a really amazing thing because they're literally just square planes extended up from the rest of the wall. The addition of battlements implies that this wall has walkways on top of it, but if you look at the protrusions from any angle that isn't dead on, you can clearly see that they're completely flat. And over in this corner they don't even line up, like the walls aren't even the same height. So the illusion this wall is meant to portray just doesn't hold up when held to any amount of scrutiny. There are also no trees looking over the wall. Like, we're in the Forest Temple, in the center of the overgrown and misty lost woods, but from here there's no hint of that area's essence, or that we're even near a forest at all. This castle is completely untethered from its context in the larger world of Ocarina of Time. You can tell that there's nothing actually behind that wall, and you get the sense that this whole environment is just floating in the middle of an endless expanse of static blue sky. I would consider this site alone to count as a secret area, in a similar vein to the Minus world, because it's this place that takes shape in a way that the designers never really intended. Of course they consciously built the geometry and wrapped the texture and drew the skybox, but they probably didn't realize what a surreal atmosphere they'd created by leaving things so crude. That atmosphere and meaning are consequential in a similar way to how Super Mario's glitches are consequential. And this isn't to shit on the developers for overlooking this, because this place wouldn't be half as interesting to me if they'd given it more attention. I gotta cite my sources here. This segment is inspired by fellow YouTuber Ennie Austin and his series of videos centered around exploring unremarkable and odd places in usually retro 3D video games. If I had to try and sum up what he does on his channel, I'd say his niche is judging video games from unconventional perspectives, often shining a light on how games differ from real life. In the case of the Unremarkable and Odd series, he observes certain environments as though they were virtual art installations, and meditates on their artificiality, finding a surprising amount of unintended meaning within them.
I wish I could just go stand there and just feel what it feels like to be down, away from everything. You know, the imagination is set further aflame by the unattainable. That's why we fall in love with people that we've never met.
Maybe it's the art student brain rot setting in, but I find these unremarkable and odd places to be perhaps the most interesting form of secret area there is. In the other types of secret areas I've discussed, you access to them by doing something like breaking an illusory wall, or causing the game to malfunction, performing some tactile action that grants you access. With this type of area, the way reveals itself when you, metaphorically speaking, equip your lens of truth. You have to be in touch with the power of vibes to stop and appreciate the form and meaning of this space. To me, the magic of this kind of secret area is that it's analogous with real life. Go out into the real world looking for unremarkable and odd places, and you'll find yourself discovering secret areas of your own. You've probably seen this in the form of art centered on stuff like liminal spaces, which are really popular on the internet right now. You can't glitch or break an illusory wall in real life unless you're Eastern European, but you can sure as hell sneak under the bleachers at your old high school's football stadium and get a not dissimilar effect. Another beautiful thing about it is that beauty sort of lies in the eye of the beholder. When you find a secret area of your own, you can usually rest assured that you're the only one who knows about it and appreciates it. These are secret spaces that you make for yourself, much like the one I'm in right now. Tell me about some of your favorite secret areas, whether they belong to video games or real life or wherever you find them. And thank you for watching, I really appreciate that. Shit. I gotta get back to bed. Mom wakes up soon. She fucking hates me, dude. And look, it's Turd Sucker 7615.